Welcome, brothers, sisters, fellow travelers. My name is Joel and this is Good Crazy.
Jesus directly linked the love that we have for him with whether or not we keep his commandments. And it's amazing that we look around today and so many people claim to love Jesus, claim that he is their king, and yet find it okay to ignore many of his commandments. For instance, as I've talked about in a previous video, he said, "Do not judge." And yet, so many Christians are some of the most judgmental people you might meet because they find ways to excuse that sort of behavior. And that's why judgment or judging is a snare, something that we might think is okay, but really, he told us not to do it, and it's harmful to us. Another snare, just like judging, is the snare of leadership. And this can be a hard one to understand because we've all grown up in a world where hierarchy is commonplace, it's normal. Like, how would we survive without leaders? If you take any classes on Masterclass, you'll see there are so many classes that are specifically about being a good leader, how to be a good leader. And it seems like it would be a good thing. If you want to help people, you step up and you assume a role of leadership. But that is the opposite of what Jesus told us to do, right? He, speaking to his disciples, including his apostles, he said, none of you should be called leaders or instructors. And that may be hard to understand, but once again, just like with judging, people find the excuse that, well, maybe it's not possible. Maybe Jesus is asking the impossible of us. And maybe that'll be possible in heaven, but not here on earth. Or the other excuse might be, well, at least if I'm a good leader, then it will be okay. But that's not what he said. In fact, he contrasts the religious leaders of that time, where he says they like the front seats in the synagogue, they like being called titles like rabbi. But he tells them, you're not to be like that. You're not supposed to be called rabbi because one is your teacher, the Christ. And he says you shouldn't call anyone father on earth because one is your father in heaven. And interestingly, there, as a side point, there are specific religions that call themselves Christians where people who are not your biological father expect to be called father. And in fact, the Pope, right? People might think that's just a title, but Pope literally means father, and he's called the Holy Father, which is in contrast to what Jesus said, which is that one is your Father, he is in heaven. And then he goes on to say that you shouldn't be called leaders either, because you have one leader, and that is also Christ. So he paints a different picture for us of what leadership is supposed to be like. And we might think, well, how would it be possible to not have leaders? It seems like you have to have someone to take charge. And there's a difference between being someone who takes charge in a group where everyone consents and wants that versus someone who says, I'm in charge here, I have the authority, and I can tell you to do what I say, regardless of whether you want to do it or not. That's what he's talking about. That type of authority does not belong to us as human beings. He says the reason that they shouldn't be called teacher or father or leader is because all of you are brothers. And that's the key difference. If you ever, when you're young in a family, had siblings who try to tell you what to do, it can be kind of funny because they might feel like they're in charge. Maybe they're your older brother or sister and they think they have the right to tell you what to do. But ultimately, they're just your brother or sister. They're not your parent. They don't have that type of authority. If they were telling you to do something that you wanted to do and agreed to do, like, hey, let's go play basketball or something, you might go along with it because it's something you want to do. But as soon as they say, hey, you need to do the dishes, who says? I say. well, then who are you? You're just my brother or my sister. You don't have that authority over me. And that is the key difference that Jesus is pointing out for us, that he is our leader. His commands take precedent, and they're all that we need to know how to get through life. We don't need anyone else to tell us how to do things because his commands are laid out for us. And when it comes to having someone in charge, I think to, for instance, I worked for quite a while as a nurse, and sometimes there would be code situations. That is to say, when a patient is in an emergency, like they are potentially about to die, and so everyone there springs into action. And it would be potentially chaos if there weren't somebody calling the shots. So someone might be doing chest compressions, another person might be starting an IV or giving IV medications, another person might be getting the defibrillator. There's another person might be writing down what's happening during the code so that we can have that information later. And another person is telling everyone what needs to happen. They're basically coordinating the effort. But everyone there is in agreement. We're trying to save this person's life. And that role of who's in charge of the code can change. It can be a different person next time. There's no particular person that has to be the one running the code. And that's the way it goes. Anything that we want to do in life, it is sometimes helpful to have someone who's coordinating it, who's running it, but it's something that we all agree that we want to do. And where the difference lies is when we start to feel that we know best for other people. Even when they don't want to do something, we think, I know, and I'm in charge, and I'm going to tell you what to do. Jesus tells his disciples, for instance, that that is what they see in the world around us, that people who are the rulers of this world, how they exercise their authority is by dominating other people, making them do what they want. And he says, it's not supposed to be like that with you. He says, the greatest among you is supposed to be the servant of all. What is a servant? A servant is a person without authority over others, who's just looking to, what are your needs? How can I help you? That's supposed to be the Christian way. But when we look at the churches, they are filled with leaders. They go by all these different titles. They might be pastors or reverends or deacons or priests or bishops. So many different titles that apply to the individuals who are taking leadership roles in the church. And once again, we might think, well, as long as they're doing it in a good way, then it's okay. But therein lies the problem. Jesus ties our love to him as to whether or not we are following his commandments. And the idea that we could be good leaders, that we could say, I know better than you do, it's so sadly misguided. Because unlike Jesus, as I mentioned in previous videos, he was able to read the hearts of other individuals, tell what their thoughts were. He knew his Father in heaven in a way that we don't know. He knew what was going to happen in the future. That's the kind of leader that we need. We, in contrast to that, we're all blind. Like, there's so much that we don't see. So the idea that we could be a good leader, that we could know for certain what's good for other people, is really misguided. As Jesus said, when the blind lead the blind, they both fall into a pit. And so it goes. And he's warning us about that because of the effect that being a leader has on a person. This is what's hard to really grasp, is how it negatively affects you to be a leader. And you see the effects of it throughout Christianity and in other religions as well, where people have put their faith in human beings. They've said, oh, wait, this man is a priest. He's a holy person. He has dedicated his life to God. So it's okay for me to leave my children with him alone because he's a holy person. And then something terrible happens as a result of them blindly believing that a human being could be over other human beings, to have that authority. So we can see that when Jesus is telling us not to be called leaders, but to be servants of other people. He's trying to do us a favor. He's trying to look out for our well being. Because, as the saying goes, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And of course, that's not a verse in the scriptures. That's not something Jesus said. But I think we all can feel the truth of that. That when someone sets themselves up as a leader and they try to get other people to do things that they don't want to do, well, when they make mistakes, sometimes they feel a desire to hide those mistakes from others because then they might question their authority. And what does that lead to when you start hiding facts about yourself? It can be very dangerous. And similarly, when people start to view you as a leader, as special, as maybe holier or more spiritual than others, it has a negative effect on our spiritual well-being because we don't really have that authority and never were supposed to have that authority. When you think back to the nation of Israel, there was a time when the people of Israel insisted on having a king. They wanted a human leader, and God provided them with Saul as a king. But when talking to Samuel about that, because Samuel felt very hurt by the fact that the people of Israel had made that choice, had insisted on having a human king, God said, "It's not you they have rejected. It's me they have rejected because we don't need human leaders. Everything that we want to do, we can accomplish together. Sure, we can assign someone to coordinate the effort, to run the effort, but we don't view them as having any more authority than we do because we are all brothers and sisters. And our Father is the only one who has the true authority." And so it goes, like I mentioned earlier, with the code. When you're running that in a hospital, if the person running the code were to ask the people to do something that they believed was wrong, they wouldn't do it. They would view it as unethical and they wouldn't continue on. So they're allowing the person to coordinate the effort, but they're not saying, "You can tell us what to do even when we believe it's wrong." And therein lies true Christianity. We see every single person as having the same level of autonomy over themselves as we have for ourselves. And so that is the essential lesson that Jesus, whenever he gave us commands, it was for our own good. And it can be hard in this world to understand how they might apply because all we've ever known are hierarchies. People in charge of people in charge of people until you get to the very bottom. But the way it's supposed to work in Christianity is everyone that is a human being here is on the same level. We are all brothers and sisters. We look to the commands of Jesus as the commands of our leader, and we interpret them for ourselves. We allow our heart and our conscience to change and grow over time, listening to and accepting his commandments. Sometimes they can be hard to put into practice because the commands are simple, like love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemy. It can seem difficult to do, maybe something we don't want to do, but they're there for our own good. And they're there to allow us to grow. And if we interfere with the growth of another person by trying to tell them what to do, it shortens the path that they were going to take in progress, in growth as a Christian. So I hope you can see how leadership too is a snare. It might seem like a good thing, but in the end, it harms us and it harms other people and it harms our relationship with our Father who has the ultimate authority.
Until next time, may you know love, may you have peace, and may the truth set you free.